Okay, here is my supplementary gesture drawing lecture for week 3 of Sketching with Focus 2. This is just to give you some ideas about gesture once we start thinking in line, shape, and form all at once. I'm going to kind of separate this reference into those different layers and then try to do one that feels like a compound of all of them. By doing so, we have these different paradigms to think about the world through, especially when we're drawing. Think about stuff very gesturally, line-based, fluid, very, very, very efficient, succinct, simple mark making to describe something and the way it's sitting or moving or existing. We also have shape, which is very design oriented. It's very easy to design with shape, create a cool composition, sum up large batches of information. It's also the first thing we notice when we look at something is the outside shape. And you can play up or design the language. And then finally, we have form, which is like the most literal and also can be helpful for understanding. And because of that, you can use it to help describe, right? We can use boxes, we can use spheres to say, hey, this is essentially what you're looking at. Very sculptural kind of attempt to distill things down into a cool new form. Each one of those is great on its own. By mixing them all together and then also bringing in your own paradigms of understanding, whether that's your taste or your own experience or understanding of whatever it is that you're drawing, you get something that you can honestly say is unique to you, and you have honestly arrived at it by sort of breaking it down into all the different pieces. So let's do that with this one real quick. I'll start with just a line-based one. How about we just do a quick draw over of this just to get an idea. I want to make sure I have a good pencil also. Yeah, that's pretty good. But that's good. It's pushing up on its back, I think is a great way to say that. It's got some force going out against gravity. I feel like it's kind of pointing its head that way. Even its eyes are pointing up a little bit, so there's some good upward energy here. So I could try to play that up by sort of pulling energy up towards the top of my lines. There's also energy going down from gravity and the weight of things. So it's both working against gravity and then being affected by gravity. We have sort of scaffolding on these joints holding everything up. So that's kind of what we want to do with our first initial pass at thinking about this is how is the energy moving and flowing. So if you need to start with just like a center line, that's totally fine, but it's not going to be much on something like this. It's just very static looking frog, very statuesque, but very static. And then let's just find like some of our larger shapes, larger forces pushing up. I feel like the back of the head here has a lot of energy to it. So maybe I'll throw in some lines like so. And then the belly is really nice, and this is going to create a cool kind of back and forth rhythm happening. And energy pushing that way, and energy pushing that way. Already it's starting to feel kind of structured and interesting. And then we have all these sort of secondary shapes pushing up, like this. Pushing up. Even the mouth you could describe. Energy going up. And the arms here. Okay, belly comes up here and out, and then I'm going to put this leg in. Really nice secondary shape here. And let's just throw a couple little lines over here. That's essentially our subject. We've done it. You wouldn't really need to do much more than that. I feel like that describes things pretty succinctly. I like the way it feels. Maybe push some line weight in a couple different places. But the goal here is to create a back and forth sort of ping-ponging happening. And I think I've done that. Feels good to me, right? We have hitting here, and then it bounces over and hits these. We've got this nice little curve bringing us back in. This kind of guides us back up into the top. Even leave off the eyes if you wanted to, but I think they're working. Okay, so that would be a good like gestural drawing of this frog. I could, of course, try different things, use different mediums, but let's just call it there for this one. Move that off to the side. Put it down here. Oops. Okay, there's my line gesture frog. Now let's do one that's a little bit more shape-based. I didn't talk about this much in class, but I think I did it in like Adam's Draw yesterday, and I really liked it. When we use a frame, if you remember back in Sketching with Purpose 1 in our composition studies, by using a frame, when we start to break down our shapes, what's the first shape that we usually consider and start to chop up? What's the largest shape that's visible? It's the frame. So this is like a really important thing that I think even when you're just putting a drawing on a page in your sketchbook, you can start to think about. We don't want to like have like centered, symmetrical compositions. So try to avoid these kind of points of contact for like hot spots of your image. That should be going down to the corner. Like don't put the, like this, honestly, you could scoot over and move around a little bit and make it a little bit more interesting because it feels kind of centered, right? There's a nice balance to the image, but not in a way that's aesthetically pleasing. We want the eye to have somewhere to go within the image, so we can play that up. Let's get rid of those lines I just drew. You don't have to use a box to do this. You can still be thinking about its general place on the page. When we're drawing on these giant sheets of paper, you can be thinking about its relation to the other things on your paper. You can also just draw boxes. Draw a frame around it. So if I was to divide this up, we can start thinking about it like this. Chopping. And it's nice to use straight lines for this. It makes it a little bit easier, I think. But like that is a cool shape, I think. That could be our first shape. If it's hard for you to simplify because you see all the details, try to limit yourself to straight lines and try to do it in like under 7 lines and see if you can do it for any subject. I mean, it might be more obviously for like a crazy advanced scene, but try to just limit the amount of straight lines and see if you can build it with that. So there's some cool things happening, but you'll notice that now we get these like negative shapes. There's a triangle there. That's almost a triangle there. That's kind of triangular. 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 Almost looks like an aperture lens. But we can create those shapes and emphasize it in our shape study here. So let's try that. How about this time I'm going to move it over a little bit. I'm still thinking about shape design. Long, straight curve over here. Straight curve, let's knock some more. Straight and a curve. And then some more like pinchy sharps on this side, more action, active versus passive. I still feel like I can move this head over a little bit. Okay, maybe we'll play it up a little bit. Thinking about interior shapes here. How much can I sum up this information? We want to have nice tapers, no symmetry. So I'm kind of adjusting that arm a little bit to feel a little bit more interesting. Okay, interior shapes. Nice S-curves, great things like that. So that feels like it's right in the middle. I don't like that very much. So why don't we try to push everything forward just a little bit here. If we're drawing lightly, that shouldn't be too hard to adjust. Get this kind of cap shape up here. That's nice. Cool interior shape there. Can build up some of this information. But again, we want this to be a nice, strong read on the left side. Almost have a tangent there. This is how I want to be thinking when I'm working with shape, trying to break it up into shape. Make it nice and comfortable, easy to read. Still looks very frog-like or toad-like, but we have these big chunks that are a little bit more interesting to read. There's nothing like symmetrical. There's a nice combination of long stretches and more energy. Long stretch, more energy, right? That's what we're going for. If you wanted to put in like some shadow shapes and stuff, you could do that right now. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So there's my shape version. Very different vibe than the line version that we just did. And you're trying to imagine still these cuts here. Does that create an interesting negative space? The lines that cut into the shape as well. Okay, finally, let's do the form one. This could be a lot of like figure artists will do something that's a little more elliptical, and that's a great way to start. So you're essentially just thinking of where's my horizon line, or where's the area where it flattens to my eye, and then creating this idea throughout the form and changing it as it rolls away from us. Same with all the arms and legs, whatever it is. That's not very specific. It's also not like breaking up the information that much into just digestible pieces. It's just like a slinky. So you don't have to do that. I think you shouldn't when you're trying to draw. But a more form-based would be thinking through the form. Instead of my initial 2D read, how can we make this feel very three-dimensional? So again, we still want to start with the big piece. Maybe you start with, I don't know, like something like that. And I'm still imagining the elliptical nature of it, of course, because we're going around the form, but pretty flat there. And then maybe I take this wedge shape here, like a wedging half cylinder. And then these are spheres. This is not going to be very aesthetic or interesting because it's all simplifications, but it does help you understand in space and describe in space how this is all moving. We've lost all the gestural nature here. So this is not like, this is why I put form at the end, because we want to add it into the other ones where needed. Use center lines if you need to. Right, because I already want to start cutting into this, but if you force yourself to really keep it simple, it still looks like a frog. This is like a low poly frog, like a wind-up toy, maybe. Okay, that's interesting. Is it the best? I don't think so. There's no best or worse here, but the goal is just to understand what's actually happening here. Okay, form-based frog. Whatever. So now, how can I combine all of those together? Create like a gestalt. Infuse a little bit of my own taste. That's where it's going to differ from person to person. Where are we emphasizing form in this drawing? Where are we emphasizing shape? Where are we emphasizing line? How should we do it? Okay. Thinking about that energy projecting upwards. Pinch on this side. See that like bean shape that I've been talking about so much. Pull that up a little bit here. Starting with a flow. And it's very easy to find these things again since I just did it so many times, right? That's kind of the value of this. I can get moving pretty fast here. I have that experience baked in now. Okay, there's like my line drawing a little bit pushing it here and there. But now let's start to think about shape. I can pull pieces from each of these that I thought was aesthetically pleasing. So I really like the way the back looked on that shape one. And then curve down. And then we had like a secondary curvy form here. That was pretty cool. I like that. Same with the arms. Very easy to break that into just a simple shape. Fingers in. Creating a contrapost here. Mouth, elbows. And then if I put this hand a little bit higher, it'll create the last segment there. So we have a nice kind of rhythm bouncing back and forth through the drawing. All right. Now, when we get up here, this is maybe a good time to start thinking about form. Let's be a little bit more specific with things. I'm going to be very intentional with the eyes. I have this sort of like lid that's like a form intersection happening here. And then a sphere on the inside. Build that rounded shape in there. Also a way to think about form, sitting right on the top. Here's my eyelid on the other side. I'm thinking about how the form is flowing over these areas. And I'm going to build that second sphere right there. Just a tiny bit more consideration to the form here. Just a little bit. Building. So I'm not breaking stuff down into like my initial reaction and understanding of the shapes that I'm seeing or the lines that I'm seeing. I'm really trying to think about what's actually happening in 3D space here and using that to develop my drawing. And that's kind of the difference. It's not necessarily about like what you draw all the time. It's about how you're thinking about your drawing. This other leg, I don't really like that this foot is just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so I'm just going to ignore it, get rid of it. And it will serve my drawing better. Maybe throw a couple wrapping lines just to describe that form a little bit more. Can we put our wrapping lines somewhere where it's going to actually increase the aesthetic quality of the drawing? Or is it solely going to be a constructionary thing? Because I've already got the thing built and drawn. How much do I need to construct, right? There's that organ right there. Right, so I kind of delegated my form just to sort of my focal point to sort of play up and attract attention up towards the face. Everything else is kind of increasingly loose, and by now the timer would probably have gone off, right? But everything is getting increasingly loose as I move away. I don't mind a couple of like wrapping lines here, but your wrapping lines also don't need to be a perfect elliptical kind of thing like that. Wrapping lines can go any way they want around a form. So I could do some wrapping lines like this. That's still a wrapping line. Okay, so do it lightly, but then it has like more of an aesthetic quality to it. You kind of see I did that with the belly. I'm like curving and rolling with these aesthetic CS and I lines. You can design your lines, even if they're like just purely informational and don't exist on the form that you're drawing. You can design them to just give yourself a little bit more interest. So it's a lot to think about all at once. That's an unfortunate truth, but that's why it's nice to divide it into these pieces. We've been spending each week sort of focusing on the different pieces. As you do this more and more and more, you can start doing a lot of these things more automatic. Also, this is like kind of, I basically just did the last 3 weeks of homework for this frog. We did a line version, we did a shape version. Now I'm doing like kind of a gestalt form shape line version. the comfort to draw a subject as you draw over and over and over again is going to increase as well. So you're clearing up space in your like processing power to instead make more considerations about design, about how you want to change things, about the pose shifting, whatever you want to do. All of that is slowly getting baked in. You don't have to consider as much, so it should go faster. It should be easier. Okay, I hope that helps. That's kind of, I don't know. I think it's a fun combo here. I think I probably overworked that a little bit because I was just talking and drawing. But if I only had like 2 to 3 minutes, timer went off. You want to make sure you're like working from the head out where your focal point is, depending on the subject, of course. But in this case, working from the head. Once you get those forms in there, you can start being a little bit more loose with everything else. But the nice thing about the timer is it's going to keep you loose. You're going to run out of time before you can go back in and define all the forms and the contours of the stuff around the feet and the legs. And that could stay more gestural. This almost looks like one of those old like Hokusai ink drawings. It's very loose and flowy and not super defined, which I like. All right, hope that gives you some better direction. I know I took longer to record this than I wanted to, but I know you're kind of far into the week. But just start thinking in those terms. You've already been doing these first 2 drawings the last 2 weeks, so now it's just a matter of adding in some form consideration. That could also be in the form of, no pun intended, a little bit of rendering here and there. Maybe you throw in a little bit, just a tiny bit, around your focal point to kind of pull the eye up there a little more. But then trail off as you get further down.